Hello everybody, it's Wyron here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 quick match gameplay. This time around I'm playing as the Dark Elves against the Lizardmen led by Acuvis on the map of the Golden Colossus. And trying out the shades this time around. So something I've been doing is, or I've been trying to do with my Dark Elves is running Death Hags as sort of a frontline tank unit. Now this might seem strange, they do have fairly low HP and all that, but they are a single model, which makes them a little hard to take out. They're fairly survivable because of that, because there's only a few models that can be hitting them at a time. They cause very high damage, they cause poison, so they debuff enemy troops, and they're just a rather powerful unit overall. They definitely cause quite a bit of hurt. They have an AoE debuff that they cause, which reduces enemy melee attack, and if you stagger them out, they can be very useful. So what I decided to do here, though, I decided to go a little cheap on the lords. I brought Marathi instead of Malekith on a dragon, so I brought Marathi on Sulafet, and I didn't bring too many spells. I brought a Pit of Shades, I brought a Power of Darkness, Soul Stealer, and Soul Blight, and of course Deadly Onslaught, just for a little bit of extra damage. Now Marathi's not a terrible melee combatant, but she does have fairly low survivability. Her HP is fairly low. She only has some physical resistance, some missile resistance, a little bit of magic resistance, very little armor. So she's definitely very susceptible to just kind of shut down by enemy ranged fire. She does have Enchanting Beauty though, so she's constantly debuffing troops around her. And alongside Death Hags, I'm hoping that I can definitely hold the fort in the front line. The rest of my front line is composed of Dread Spears. I have only 3 units of them, and they are veteraned up. These guys have fairly high melee defense. They have fairly high melee attack, decent melee attack, and they have anti-large and silver shields. So against the cheaper skirmish units or skirmish weaponry of the Lizardmen and against the large units, these guys will perform fairly okay. Now I have 2 units of Witch Elves. These guys are there to kind of force my opponent to rampage, to tear through his lighter armored skinks, because skinks are a rather popular pick because they don't rampage, and just apply that Madness of Cain so that my opponent can't break out and escape the Witch Elves. Then I have 2 units of Dark Shards with shields. These guys are there to tear through enemy large targets and dish out immense amounts of hurt. These guys got 23 missile damage with armor piercing, 125 range. Silver shields means that the Lizardmen range units that they bring, the skink skirmishers, or they just use the skinks with javelins to try to harass me, it's going to struggle quite a decent amount against Dark Shards shields. And then my kind of flanking force. I have 2 units of Shades with great swords. These guys are there to bust up enemy heavily armored infantry, as well as enemy heavy monsters and heavy duty monsters and that sort of stuff. And they are escorted by 2 units of Dark Riders, and these are vanilla Dark Riders without shields. I was hoping to use them to get into my opponent's backline and kind of try to get on top of his sort of skirmishers, because I've been seeing those fairly often. As it turns out, my opponent did not bring any of them. I think this is somewhat a little bit. My opponent did bring Krokar. Krokar just kind of being the vanilla pick for Lizardmen nowadays. I do believe he came in without Hand of God, or Hand of Gods, which is interesting, but though not necessarily a bad choice. It is a fairly expensive skill that is not always useful. Alongside it, and he is of course on Grimlock, so he can just rampage through everything and cause immense amounts of hurt. He's alongside it. Sorry about that, got something stuck in my throat. Skink Priests of Heaven, or Beasts, on a Pterodon, just to give him a little extra mobility. The Pterodon mount has absolutely atrocious melee stats and charge bonus. It's even worse than the Great Eagle for the Wood Elves. So as far as combat stats go, so it's something you basically just bring from that added mobility. And you come with most of his, or actually maybe all of his spell roster, including Transformation of Kadon and Curse of Anrire, which is a bit interesting. You don't really see that one very often. And then front line of skink cohorts with javelins and a single unit of normal skink cohort just to kind of soak up my initial damage and tear through my infantry. It's also very hard to teleport skink cohorts from Sarce warriors if you're just glancing at the banners, and it can definitely be used as a bit of bait that way. The skink cohorts with javelins will actually do okay damage with their ranged missile attack, because there's a lot of them, and as long as they have ammo, of course. Once they don't have ammo, that's not the case. Then 5 units of Sarce warriors shields. These guys will be very tanky. They have very high melee attack, or very high melee damage, and very high armor. Or well, for a normal infantry, they have very high armor at 60, and they will actually shred through dread spears. Not very quickly, but they will definitely tear through them with minimal casualties. Peril got a bit of an interesting choice against Dark Elves, given that Dark Elves have a lot of anti-large and a lot of armor piercing, but it could definitely cause some hurt and cause some terror bombs on my army. And then finally a unit of Pterodons over here, just to provide some additional pressure and harassment and range. And over here in the woods we have Cold One Spear Riders hidden. And one of the interesting things is that Cold One Spear Riders for Lizardmen actually don't rampage. They are not able to rampage. This is the Dark Elf ones can rampage, and it's definitely a bit of a problem for them. But Lizard ones cannot. They will definitely tear through the Dark Riders very, very quickly. I'm not entirely sure they'll do that well against Shades, but definitely against Dark Riders they do pretty well. So what I'm doing now is I'm simply pushing forward, trying to apply some pressure to my opponent, trying to get my Dark Shards on top of his Pterodons and just start sniping him down a little bit. These are just the vanilla Pterodons, so these guys don't have any, they just have throwing javelins, I do believe. They don't have any, these guys don't have any, what was I about to say? They don't have any explosives or any AoE damage. You can see they take a volley from the Dark Shards and decide that discretion's the better part of valor and back off. They didn't do too much damage to the Witch Elves either, which is good for me. In the meantime, over here, my opponent did posture a bit with the Cold One Riders, but he spotted these Shades and that decided to back off. In the meantime, these Dark Riders are just posturing to screen the Shades. These guys will do terrible against Cold One Spear Riders, because that bonus against large, plus armor piercing, plus the high armor on the Cold One Spear Riders means they will absolutely shred the poor Dark Riders. But now my opponent's closing on me, and it's definitely going to be a bit of a rough fight. He outnumbered me somewhat heavily, and the Star Warriors will trade very well with most of my troops. You can see a volley from the Dark Shards does go into the Skink Cohort, definitely a bit of a waste. I do have a tendency to leave units on auto fire, and that was definitely not the ideal usage of ammo there. But I'm pushing straight into the fray. Unfortunately, I don't target my Death Hag, so they don't get the charge bonus off in the Star Warriors. And I also forget to cast their ability. They do have an ability called, what is it called? It's Witch Brew, and that could have been incredibly useful here just to kind of make him tankier and able to, or make him dish out more hurt to these guys. In the meantime, though, I'm throwing Marathi over here, and I do drop a Pit of Shades on top of these Star Shields because they're so clumped up. That should do quite a bit of damage to these guys. You can see he's absolutely tearing through their HP very, very effectively. In the meantime, you can see the Star Warriors tearing through the Dread Spears. Over here, the Witch Elves and the Dark Riders have engaged upon Skinks and Cold One Spear Riders. The Cold One Spear Riders absolutely are rampaging because the Witch Elves hit them, but you can see the Dark Riders are already practically annihilated. Second unit is practically annihilated, and it's definitely a bit of a mosh pit in there. But now what I'm doing is I'm pressuring this Stegodon with fire from the Dark Shards. A Flock of Doom does go down. It's doing quite a bit of hurt here. I will try to split these units up. I'm pushing the Witch Elves into the fray here. And you can see the Spears are not doing well against the Star Warriors. In the meantime, though, I'm focusing on Kroq-Gar, trying to do as much hurt as I possibly can to him. Over here, Marathi did engage on the Pterodon Riders, and I did drop a Soul Stealer just to try to take down Kroq-Gar as quickly as I can. You can see Kroq-Gar is taking massive amounts of fire. He's even with cold-blooded, he's not going to be able to tank through all this ranged fire coming in from so many different angles. And he's going down very, very quickly. Marathi now, I'm bringing her back, trying to get on top of Kroq-Gar to put him down. But you can hear my opponent did summon a Manticore, and this is definitely going to be a problem for me. The Manticore does have fairly high weapon strength. Against something that's as lightly armored as Marathi or most of my infantry, it's actually going to be able to dish out quite a bit of hurt. In the meantime, though, Kroq-Gar has broken, and he will get gunned down before he can get clear. You can see the Murderous Prowess has gone down. You can see Marathi is getting absolutely torn apart by the Manticore and the Skink Priest. Now what I should have done here with Marathi is, because she's actually pretty quick, she has 105 speed, I should just run away and start kiting. And instead what I do, I decide to land on top of these infantry, hoping that by landing in there, I'll be able to get help from my own infantry. This is a big mistake, and you can see it actually, the only thing it does is enables my opponent to get his full charge bonus in, and Marathi goes down like a 9-pin. I definitely should have simply cycled her around and escaped, gotten my spells back off cooldown, and then torn through my opponent that way. In the meantime, though, this Skink Priest has been shattered by focused Shade Fire. The Shades are doing absolutely immense work here. They've already veteraned up a few times, and after annihilating Kroq-Gar earlier, now they're just firing at these Star Warriors. Unfortunately, because some of my units here are terrified by the Stegodon, they're running the wrong way, and that is definitely a bit of a problem here. You can see I do start microing my Shades back. I don't never use Skirmish Mode. Skirmish Mode is an atrocious thing, in my opinion, and I avoid using it at all costs. So you can see here I'm microing away with the Shades, just trying to avoid getting caught up by these guys. I'm going to split, and I'm going to hit him in the flank with Dark Riders and Witch Elves, and try to shoot him down with the Shades. Over here, the Manticore is fighting against the Dark Shards, and there's nothing I can do against the Manticore. Simply put, there's no units I have available to shut it down. I had a very small front line, and most of that front line is routing off over here. The Pterodons are harassing the Dark Shards. These guys actually have pretty terrible melee stats, just like the Skink variant, or Skink Priest variant, but they are able to just keep permanently routing. These Star Warriors have kind of rallied. I have a few infantry units rallying here and there. You can see the Dark Shards get a little bit of fire into this feral Manticore before the Stegodon plows into him and terrifies them. In the meantime, the Witch Elves, the Death Hag, and the Dark Riders are doing their very best to tie down these Skink Cohorts and the Star Warriors. And the Witch Elves actually have very decent melee stats, so they will tear through these guys, especially the Skink Cohorts, very, very quickly. Spear Riders are coming back, and my Shades actually managed to split and tear through these Star Warriors with shields. And now they're repositioning to start firing on these units over here. I do pick off a few more Star Warriors. They will actually get, interesting enough, routing units will actually attack when they're retreating, and I do believe they actually do a little bit of damage here to the shades on their way out, which is a little unfortunate for me. You can see in the meantime, though, the shades are just whittling these guys down. The shades do immense amounts of work. They do a lot of damage. They have 34 ranged. They have 38 right now. Not entirely actually sure why. Oh, it's because they've leveled up, but it's 34 baseline missile damage per 10 seconds. And you can see at this point, though, that the only units I have left are the Dread Spears and some Witch Elves, and so it's definitely a bit of a pickle for me. I'm trying to focus on this Feral Stegodon, kill it off. Over here on the left flank, my Witch Elves and my Dread Spears are struggling to re-engage on these Sarge Warriors. Their morale's pretty bad. You can see over here there's Dark Riders running off. And just trying to do my very best to distract my opponent, focus him down. You can see the bar is actually very much in my favor, and that is mostly because of these shades. And you can see the shades did take some damage there from the retreating Sarge Warriors, which is, I think, a bit annoying, but nothing I can do about that. The Witch Elves are doing pretty well here. You can see the Skinks are trying to push through, and I do hit them with the Witch Elves. And that actually puts them out of control, which is huge. At least gives me a moments of reprieve. Now they're closing the gap on the shades. What I should have done here is thrown the shades straight into the gap. Shades actually have a respectable charge bonus of 18, which is very solid. And I could have definitely gotten that off on these Skinks and done a little bit more damage that way. But as you can see, the shades with their very, very good melee stats. These guys have immense melee attack and melee defense. It's about around the 40 for both. And bonus against infantry and armor piercing. These guys will not take any damage really from the Skinks. They'll just tear through them like a knife through butter. I think they lost one model in that whole exchange. In the meantime, though, I'm trying to be very conservative with my Shades ammo. One of their problems is that they tend to run out of ammunition very, very quickly. So what I'm trying to do here is I'm just trying to tear through these Sarge Warriors. I'm prioritizing the Sarge troops because if they're the biggest threat. The Skinks I can tear through in melee with the Shades. So you can see I focus on these Sarge Warriors. Unfortunately they're just wavering, but last second they do break. And I'm simply trying to pressure these Sarge Warriors off the field, hopefully shatter them. In the left flank over here I have lost there, and my opponent does still have these Pterodons. He does still have some Sarge Warriors' shields, Skink Horde, though of course they're out of ammo. You can see the Shades once again push in, and they tear through the Skink Horde very, very quickly. They don't lose a single model in the process. My Witch Elves have actually rallied, and you can see things are not entirely in my favor. But the Shades with their immense melee stats, I'm hoping will allow me to survive this game. Already up to 124 kills, up to 90 over here. I'm simply pushing onward. I've turned off auto fire. I do not want to waste a single shot of ammo on the Skinks. I need to deal with these Sarge Warriors who are still very healthy. You can see these Pterodons actually break by mere proximity at this point. And I'm simply trying to regroup my Shades and start focusing on these Sarge Warriors, all while keeping these Skinks under constant pressure. The Witch Elves have also rallied, and I'm using them to simply chase these Sarge Warriors off the field, but the Witch Elves have very low HP at this point. They're not really fit to fight, plus they're very far away. You can see the crossbow fire is coming down on the Sarge Warriors, doing some pretty crazy work. We're going to see, I do believe, another volley here. You can see they were at 4,800, and despite the fact that they have bronze shields, they go down by about 1,000 HP between the two Shades. And I'm simply ignoring these Skinks because the Skinks are a joke. I can definitely tear through them very easily. You can see these guys run out of ammo, and I'm just simply going to throw these Shades with great swords into the fray to tear through these Skinks. You can see these Sarge Warriors are already very badly beaten up, but they still have a respectable amount of HP at 2,800. They do take another volley from these last Shades over here, and now I'm going to simply try to push straight in. And as the Skinks break, this second unit of Shades is going to hit the Sarge Warriors. You can see even the Sarge Warriors aren't doing that well against the Shades because they have very high melee defense, and Sarge Warriors do not have the best of melee stats. I mentioned this before. Their melee attack and defense is somewhat lackluster. Most of their power comes from their high individual HP and weapon strength. So, kind of looking, that was a rather close game. Definitely, I was saved by the Shades and their ridiculous power, and the Witch Elves, I suppose. These guys gained 3 and 2 chevrons. The Witch Elves actually gained 1, so another impressive performance there. So some mistakes I definitely made. I should have popped the extra damage ability on the Death Hags. That could have definitely helped when they were tying down my opponent. That was a huge mistake on my part. I also made a huge mistake with Marathi. She was at about 2,000 HP, and what I should have done is either focus down the enemy flyers with my own shooting and try to keep Marathi in the fight, or I should have just started running away. Because Marathi has 105 speed to the Manticore's, I think, 80 or 85, and the 90 on the Pterodons. So I could have simply kited for days. Instead, what I did was I tried to be sneaky. I tried to run down, land in the middle of the melee fight, and that way keep Marathi safe in the middle of her own troops. But there wasn't that many troops of mine left anyway, and the only thing it allowed was the Manticore to get its charge bonus off. So she died very quickly, and that nearly cost me the game, I think. So the heroes didn't perform too well, and that was definitely a bit of a problem for me. The Dread Spears also did not do great work. They got torn up by the Saurus Warriors, as could be expected. And you can see the Saurus Warriors had ridiculous kill counts. The Witch Elves did one of the Witch Elves did not do particularly well. They got torn up rather quickly and then couldn't really get back into the fight. The other unit of Witch Elves tore through some Skinks, tore through the Spear Riders, and then helped stall my opponents. Saurus Warriors for my my Shades to do work. Dark Shards got very little damage done, but they were mostly focusing large units. They focused the Feral Stegodon, Pterodon Riders, and Grokkars, so they didn't get much of an opportunity to get kills. I wish I'd seen their XP. I think these guys did actually better than this would indicate. Unfortunately, they did get terror routed by the Stegodon, and that meant that they routed the wrong way, of course, because how else could they route? And they got caught and massacred. The Shades did amazing work. The Shades, with their huge amounts of armor-piercing range DPS, absolutely shredded. Now, these are a very expensive unit. They cost about double of what Dark Shards with Shields cost. But they absolutely tore through my opponent's troops. They shredded the Skinks in melee. They even shredded some of the Saurus Warriors in melee, and they shot up my opponent's Krokkar. They shot up the Skink Priest, and just absolutely were monstrous. And you shows in their kill counts. The Dark Riders were a bit of a waste, I think. I was counting on my opponents to bring some sort of rear skirmish line, and it didn't happen and didn't materialize. These guys got very little done. For my opponent, Krokkar performed very poorly, and that was because I had so much range fire that just annihilated him. His King Priest did okay, I think, because it did get that transformation of Kadon off, which the Manticore actually played a huge role in killing Marathi and then pressuring my backline. He also got a very nice Flock of Doom off, which actually does okay against the lightly armored Dark Elves. The Skinks did pretty atrocious, and I think that was to be expected. Skinks are a very bad unit, and engaging against Witch Elves and then Shades is not an ideal fight for them. The Saurus Warriors ranged from doing amazing to doing terrible, depending on, I think, who they got matched up and how badly they got focused. Feral Stegodon, I think, didn't really work out the way my opponent hoped. It got focused very badly. It did get a single terror out later on against the Dark Shards, which was actually kind of decisive, but other than that, it did not perform that well. Cold One Spear Riders did great work. They tore through the Dark Riders. These guys aren't that expensive of a unit, but unfortunately, they weren't then able to exploit that fact. And the Pterodons, I think, are a bit of a waste. I don't think Pterodons are particularly good against Dark Elves. The Dark Elves have a decent selection of ranged options to shut them down. But regardless, good game to my opponent. I had a lot of fun. The Shades were absolutely monstrous. They're a very fun unit, and you will actually see quite a few Dark Elf strats nowadays revolving around just spamming Shades and kiting and being annoying in the same way Wood Elves are annoying with their kiting spam. So, but yeah, this was a lot of fun. I do hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. If you have any comments, criticism, any questions about Quick Match or Warhammer 2 or Total War, Warhammer 1 even, be sure to post those down in the comments and I'll respond as soon as I can. As usual, guys, I do appreciate you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.